Put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frack, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For Catacrow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Catacrow, Dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Catacrow, Dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the...
All right, life in the country, life in the villages, life all across Guyana. And this is what we have been bringing to you, life in the villages, right here on Anansi Web Education on 107.1 FM. Good evening again to all of you and welcome to the program. If you are in Guyana, if you are outside of Guyana, welcome to all of you beautiful folks. This evening, and we are waiting for our operator to signal to us that David Arthur Granger, the former president of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, and the former leader of the People's National Congress Reform, also the former leader of the opposition, all the titles, a man who has served in the military for over 40 years or maybe longer than that. I don't know the exact years, but I know, though, it's over 40 plus years. Anyways, all of you former military officers and soldiers are current or serving members of the Guyana Defense Force. Good evening to all of you. Our operator has indicated to me that His Excellency David Arthur Granger is actually ready to rock and roll with us, and let us welcome the former president to our program. Sometimes I don't know why I don't just call him my co-host instead of saying he will be appearing on Anansi Web Education. Good evening to you, Mr. President. How are you, sir?
Good evening, Mark Anthony Benshop. It's always good to be on this program to communicate with your viewers, both in the diaspora and at home. And it's important to keep a clear focus on the purpose of Anansi Web Education. It is to move the country forward. It is not looking back at the past, it is looking forward. We want the best that the country has to offer to the next generation. And Anansi Web Education is to help in this process. We don't know everything, but we feel that because of the fact that the majority of Guyanese do live in villages, the majority of women live in villages, we need to speak to them directly every week and about the issues that concern them. So I'm always happy to be on this program. I'm happy with the focus of this program on Guyanese, particularly Guyanese women, and most of all, Guyanese who live in or come from the villages. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on this program.
And it's always a pleasure to have you on with it. Our operator was just signaling to me and asked whether we should have some a subtitle in Spanish at the bottom. I said, no, this is Anansi Web Education. We do this in English so that all our Guyanese folks can understand. But those of you who are from other parts of the world, buenas noches, as we would say, privet out there. And that's it for now. David Arthur Granger is with us this evening, and we will be touching a familiar subject matter, nothing of any strange areas for you guys. And this will be about the yearly occurrences and unfortunate occurrences of infants who die of complications in their mothers. We want to touch on that, their mother's pregnancy, childbirth, or even postpartum, most of which are preventable again. And again, these things are preventable. Infants die also by accident, drowning, or suffocation before their first birthday. Guyana's record of infant mortality is very, very alarming. Again, we say it is very, very alarming. That's something that we ought to be looking into. And we see the figures there. It's 295 infants died in 2014. Don't be alarmed by the figures, but the numbers there. Then in 2015, 232 infants died. 97 infants died in 2020. 84 infants died in 2021. And 91 infants died in 2022. One of the first areas that we want to cover, though, and we'll have, as usual, Mr. Granger to take a shot at it. What factors, Mr. Granger, are responsible for the high rate of infant deaths? Again, what factors are responsible for the high rate of infant deaths in Guyana?
Well, this is a good place to start. We are not alone. There are other countries which suffer perhaps to a greater extent than Guyana. And we feel that all or most of these deaths are preventable. And the big causes, general causes, are poverty and malnutrition. Both are related. Most malnourished mothers are poor. And of course, in Guyana, because of the size of the country, there are other factors, but poverty and malnutrition are the two big causes. But sometimes you have cases of the mothers being anemic. In fact, I think people need to recognize that childbearing is, it takes a tremendous toll on the body, and a woman needs to be well nourished. And, husbands must understand this. The whole society must understand this. So anemic mothers are very important, are cause of death. Also, sometimes infection at the time of delivery or childbirth, and sometimes home deliveries. Many of us, at least in my age, would have been delivered by midwives, but sometimes it's better to go to a medical facility where hopefully the hygiene and sanitary arrangements and the post-delivery conditions are better than at home, because there's no standard at home. You may be living in a poor village in the hinterland or the rural Guyana, and this could be a very important factor. In addition to that, sometimes deliveries are I suppose, they take place before they are ready. That is, you need, they're preterm. That is, the term is about 37 weeks. And if a child is born, maybe after 25 or 30 weeks, a preterm, birth could be very risky. And very often the mothers are too young. And again, this is the problem. It's called children getting children. And when I was in office, my wife and I would visit the maternity ward first thing on Christmas morning. And sometimes you would see some girls who really should be playing litty. I mean, the bodies are small and undeveloped. And luckily, the public health system has a way of getting these children to a better facility, especially if they come from the hinterland or some rural area, where they can get the best possible care. Because a child who is 13 or 14 is not physically and sometimes emotionally or mentally capable of managing childbirth. And a child who delivers a child is at risk, and of course the child also is at risk. So some of these factors are, particularly preterm births, are contributory. But A, you need a healthy mother. B, you need a mature mother who is perhaps over 20 or 21. And the child has to be educated that getting a child when you're at school at age 14 or 15 is not a joke. Is not a sign of love or loyalty. It is dangerous, both to you and the child. So some factors contribute to the high rate of death because it's risky. It is risky for a 12 or 13-year-old girl to get a child. It is risky for a woman who is anemic. It is risky for a woman who's living in unsanitary conditions, maybe caused by flooding or solid waste management. A child needs to be brought into this world alive, but in good circumstances. A healthy mother, clean, hygienic, sanitary conditions in the hospital, and good post delivery care. So these are some of the factors I like to deal with. Later on, you can have issues like child dying from suffocation. Sometimes, and many of the deaths you mentioned in the opening of this program have really taken place in the course of a year, not at the time of death. The numbers of children who die on the day of birth is alarming, but when you see 200 or 300 children dying, it's probably because of the care they receive at home. So for the government, for the country, childbirth is not just an event which takes place on one day at hospital. You have to look at the preparatory phase. The mother must be nourished. You look at the actual hospitalization, delivery, and then you have to look at the post-delivery stage. So all these factors contribute to bringing into this world healthy children, and those are the factors. That's my contribution to this discussion.
Absolutely, bringing into the world healthy children, and not only just bringing them at the stage of birth and leaving them just like that. They have to be properly taken care of, including the mother, and that comes from a good healthcare system. David Otto Granger just answered the question, the first, which what factors are responsible for the high rate of infant deaths in Guyana? And we go to our second topic here now, and Mr. Granger will take a shot at that again. Why have infants in rural and hinterland villages died so early in life? This is a good question because it reminds me of a little boy growing up when I was a little boy. Many moons ago, growing up in the quarantine, a lot of youngsters, then we were all same age, whether it was a 4 or 5 or 6, and then they just died, and then they get little brothers and little sisters who died. One situation that I remember quite well, I was in third form when our teacher in third form, we heard that his baby died at the hospital, Portmont Hospital, at childbirth, or immediately after. And we saw the pain on that teacher's face, Mr. Singh's face, and it was very painful. It touched a lot of us then, and so these things are very important. It's important because people don't like to lose their loved ones, especially little kids. But I have seen a lot of those things, especially on the quarantine when I was growing up. And that is why it's important that we, those of you who are listening to this here now, to understand the need for proper health care throughout Guyana. But right now, our second topic would be, why have infants in rural and hinterland villages died so early in life? Mr. Granger?
Well, you have an advantage of being from rural areas yourself, and so you could tell the audience about the problems, the question of distance away from medical centers, the question of demography. Some areas of the hinterland or the countryside are low population density, so it is unlikely that you'd have a high class medical center there. People tend to put these big institutions in towns or cities. Well, that's one of the reasons why the APNU AFC coalition created the capital towns, so that these huge regions, for example, the Cuyuni Mazaruni, which is bigger than the Netherlands, you can't have a region bigger than the Netherlands being governed by a village. Similarly, Rupununi, bigger than Costa Rica, we made Lethem into a town. So the four regional towns, Mabaruma, Amadia, Bartica, and Lethem, are meant not only to be, local government organs or agencies, they're also meant to be the focus of health services, public health services. So you need to have a top-class regional hospital at Mabaruma, at Bartica, at Madia, and Lethem. And you can see what happened at Madia with the tragedy earlier this year, with the numerous amount of casualties. Some of them had to be sent overseas for treatment. You need top quality hospitals all over. Coming back to the maternity question, however, many of the hinterland areas the villages are far apart, and it is difficult because of the lack of roads to move from place to place. And of course, you may speak about Lethem being the capital of the region, but the region is bigger than Costa Rica, and it takes a long time to get from Aishalton or Anai to Lethem. So because of the geographic factors, because of the demographic factors, which is a low population density, because of economic factors, that many of the people in places like the hinterland villages are very poor. And when you look at the price of fuel, if you're living at Kako or Boramala, you need to get the camera. The only way you can get there is by getting a place on a boat or hiring a boat. And when fuel is being sold at over $2,000 a gallon or something, it's very costly. So there are economic factors, there are geographic factors, and of course, the problems of poverty. In addition to that, we need to attract the service of our best doctors, midwives, and nurses in the hinterland. And hinterland is not bush. Hinterland is part of Guyana. Rural areas are part of Guyana. And professionals must not only look forward to serving in the city, in Georgetown, or the town, in Amsterdam, Linden. They must also have conditions in those areas, in Bartica, Mabaroom, Madia, and Lethem, to attract the best professionals. Give them the pay, give them the allowances, give them the accommodation, so that when a woman gets ill or needs to deliver a baby, she can get the same quality treatment in Lethem or Madia that a mother can get or expect in Georgetown or New Amsterdam. So the quality of nursing, quality of professionals is also an important factor if we are to curb the spate of maternal deaths and infant deaths in the villages. We must understand that the greater part of the Guyanese population come from the villages, not the towns. The towns may be glamorous, but the villages are the homes of the majority of the population. And we'll put the majority of our resources with the majority of the people, as far as I'm concerned. So the villages deserve the best, not the least or the worst. And it's unfortunate that many of the cases of anemia or malnutrition do come from the villages. And now that we have a big problem of the cost of living, the cost of food, despite claims about food security, the reality is that many Guyanese who go to the so-called market days to buy tomatoes have to learn to speak Spanish, because the tomatoes are coming out of a box, not from Moripo or Louisiana or Blackfish Boulder, a box from Brazil or Mexico. And people just can't afford to buy those commodities. So we're not food secure, and many poor people suffer from the high cost of food. And one of the big problems for expectant mothers is nutrition. And a woman or a young girl just needs to get the best nutrition before, during, and after pregnancy. And if food is out of their reach, nutritious food, not fast food, nutritious food is out of their reach, you will get problems in the villages. The villages used to be the food bowls of the world, but now we are in El Nino. Now that there is a shortage of some types of food, and mothers have been complaining about the cost of commodities. Growing roses and sorghum is not going to help a mother who needs milk and who needs good nutrition. So these are some of the factors. And unfortunately, rural and hinterland villages suffer first. And as a result of that, the children are more susceptible to infections and to dying. So we need to take a holistic approach to maternal and infant deaths by having a sort of public health strategy, not based on specialty hospitals, but based on what mothers need. And mothers need to be well nourished, and they need to be able to deliver their children in healthy conditions in hospitals. So I would say that rural and hinterland villages suffer most. And as a result of that, we've seen a lot of deaths. And in fact, at one stage, I think the public health system adopted the practice of actually sending young mothers who are at risk to other hospitals, because they felt if they stayed in those hinterland hospitals, they would die, or their children would die. So it's not a good situation, and we need to develop a holistic policy in which we target primary health care, not specialty care, but primary health care at women in rural and hinterland villages. That's my view.
Well said. Wish I can add more to that, but primary health care, that's the key thing. Not just in certain areas, like, for example, we see happening, these folks are concentrating mainly in the specialty hospitals, private hospitals, where the bills, or even to pay an ordinary woman in a village, whether on the quarantine or whether somewhere in the hinterland or somewhere out in Kukwani or Aituni, can't afford those sort of private hospitals. And it's a government's duty to provide that sort of primary health care through health centers and all manner of things that can take care of mothers and even the little children as well. On the quarantine, as I focus back on that, I recall at Kildonan Village, there was a health center there. We go there for our flu shots, whatever it is, we went right there. All the mothers would go there as well. Even after giving birth, they will go there for follow-up care. That is exactly what we need. We need more of those access to health care in the rural and hinterland area. You shouldn't be a case where something is not available at Port Morant, then you go there and wait for 2 hours, and then only to learn that you got to go to New Amsterdam. Now, when you go to New Amsterdam, you hear that they can't take care of you at New Amsterdam. You got to go to Georgetown. It's not how you run a country. But let me just say that we saw massive improvement in the healthcare sector under the coalition government headed by David Otter Granger. Unfortunately, we're just not seeing that in terms of what's happening. People's focus are in other areas. Our final topic here has to do with, of course, the same subject matter, but how, Mr. Granger, how can infant deaths in villages be prevented? Let's get your take on that as we wrap up tonight's program.
You mentioned an important element in maternal care, that is the neighborhood, the village. And it is impossible to or it's unreasonable to demand that in every case, the mother, regardless of her condition, must go to some facility. We need to bring a facility to the mother. And it means that we need to ensure that there is a sort of village-based system in which, because most of the women in Ghana live in villages, no matter where they are, we must have a system which takes care to the mother. And that is one of the things that even if it means having a clinic in every village or in every neighborhood in this country. Oh yes, neighborhoods sound good during the time of local government elections, but that neighborhood must be the center of the delivery of health services. And there's nothing wrong with having a health center in every village so that a mother mustn't have to travel more than 1 hour in any direction to get to a clinic or to get care. And there must be emergency services so that midwives and nurses could go to homes and centers where there are difficulties. In other words, we need to have a village-based, primary health service, and not a town-based primary health service. We need to ensure that nurses and midwives could be given the means to travel to distant villages. And some of the villages are really remote in this country. Sometimes, especially in Rupununi or some of the riverine areas, you could travel for, sometimes an hour or more without coming to a single settlement. And you can imagine what happens when a mother in one of those settlements tries to get to Mabarumo or to Port Kaichuma or to some other area. All of these problems are caused by planners and administrators who do not understand the geography of this country. That when you go to these areas, when you go to Kayuni Masruni, when you go to Pataro Sepuluni, when you go to Rupununi, it's a different geographic reality. So we need to take care take health care into the communities and make sure that the mothers are given what it needs to prevent or to reverse the anemia. It needs that they must get the best education. It means that young girls in schools must be educated on how to prevent unwanted pregnancies or preterm pregnancies. And I think the medical opinion is that a 12 or 13-year-old girl doesn't have any business that should be playing litty or rounders. Let her postpone her pregnancy till her body can cope. After she's 20 or 21. So a lot of attention has to be paid in the villages. I don't have any evidence to support this view, but I think many of the maternal and infant mortality problems arise in hinterland and rural areas. And this is where the focus of our attention must be. It is all well and good to say somebody living in Charlotte Street to get into a taxi and drive to the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. Well, when you're living at Yupukari or when you're living at Shulinab, or when you're living at Young Peru, it's not so easy, and it means that the state must accept its responsibility to get care to the mothers, not the other way around. We mustn't put the burden of travel on the mothers. The burden of delivery of services must be on the public health system. And in this way, I feel that we can prevent or even curb the high incidence of rural and hinterland childhood or infant and maternity deaths.
Absolutely. As we remind folks of the breakdown of infants that die of complications in their mothers, in pregnancies, at childbirth, or even postpartum, most of which are preventable. Again, I repeat, they are preventable. And how can they be preventable? only if we do have proper primary health care, as Mr. Granger mentioned earlier. We need that, and that's essential. Not just in the tongues, like for example, you only provide and equip Georgetown Public Hospital, and even that's not the case right now. But you're forcing. No government should force citizens to go and have to use the services of a private hospital where it's very expensive. That sort of primary care should be provided, in the villages, in the hinterland, in the tongues as well, so that places under quarantine, every other or 5 minutes away, they should, or 10 minutes or whatever, or a short distance, they should have a health center. Like, for example, in Linden, across Wisma, across Mackenzie, they should have two each, apart from the hospital. No, for me, I do believe that it is a sin that when citizens are going to a health center or going to a hospital and they're turned away because they don't have proper care there, or they're forced to go to a private hospital, or they're forced to go to a hospital hours away. And so we want this to be addressed so that all the people in the villages can have access to some sort of good health care. Whether it's the villages, whether it's in Hinterland, whether it's Linden, whether it's Ituni, at that health center they have at Ituni that seem to suddenly nobody cares about it, or even in Kokwani, Bartica, and these places. They must have these proper stuff for primary care. Otherwise, we are just going to continue to see the numbers go up. Unfortunately, we don't want that. We don't want mothers to die at birth, or even after birth, or infants dying very young. We can prevent that from happening. And again, it takes a village to ensure that this happens as well. We can't only look after what is in our yard and see our neighbors' kids are malnutrition, and all these sort of things, as we say, malnutrition back home in the countryside. So today's topic, again, folks.
Let me add, before you close off, please, let me add 2 points. One is that my wife and I, several years ago, discovered, it's a truism, that there are many problems in the riverine areas which are ignored by central administration. And this is one of the reasons why we took a decision in visiting some villages in the Pomeroon River to introduce school boats. And it was because of her particularly that her interaction with one of the children, that she discovered the child didn't go to school because the child couldn't afford a boat. Now, every region in Guyana is based on rivers. Every region is named after rivers. Barima Waini River is the name of number one. Koyuni Mazaruni, Putaro Separuni, these are rivers. It means if you're going to deliver health care, if you're going to evacuate, you have to have boats. And we introduced boats not only for school children, that's for education, but we introduced boats for hospital boats and medical boats. And when you were at Barakara and Ikanji, or when you are at Ibini on the Berbice River, or when you were at Friendship on the Pomeroon River, you need a medical boat so that women could be evacuated in emergencies. That is one of the realities of governance and political service in Guyana. The second thing I like to mention in closing is the problem of nurses. It is unsustainable for this country to be losing 18 nurses a month. And the government must deal with this as an administrative problem, not a political problem. It's not an APNU problem. It's not a union problem. This is a problem of the health of the nation. And if the nurses, an important sector of government service, the public health service, if nurses have problems, the government must deal with the union which represents the nurses, which is the Guyana Public Service Union. And we must find a way of not only rehabilitating, sugar estate here or sugar estate there. We must find a way of speaking to the unions and providing the resources and assets which nurses need to stay in the country and provide quality health service. So I just like to close with those two recommendations. One, we need to deal with the riverine problem because the hinterland is not highways and tongues. It is people live on rivers, and any government in this country that does not pay attention to the rivers cannot serve its people properly. And secondly, as far as infant deaths and maternal deaths are concerned, we have to get boats because traveling on those boats by night particularly could be very hazardous. And we need to deal with the health problems in a holistic way and not in a bureaucratic way if we are to prevent infant deaths and maternal deaths. I just like to go to those two comments.
Thank you so much, and timely, well put as well. It takes an entire village to get this done. And even when you have folks who are, and as Mr. Granger said, any government, whoever is in government, they should be focusing on those in those areas as well. And when they don't, it takes a village to ensure that they do. Mr. Granger, thank you so much as always for your time as we dealt with what factors are responsible for the high rate of infant deaths. Why have infants in rural and hinterland villages died so early in life? And finally, how can infant deaths in villages be prevented? Those are the three questions we answered. Mr. Granger answered to the best of his ability. And we do hope, because we know lots of doctors and nurses are watching this program as well. And those of you who would have experienced some sort of sadness as a result of a bad healthcare system or whatever other experience you may have. My name is Mark Benshap, and together with David Otto Granger, we will be back next week, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM with AWI, which is Anansi Web Education. Mr. Granger, I hope you enjoy the rest of the night. Say buenas noches to your esposa. And for those of you, esposa means wife, esposo is husband, and buenas noches means good night. Buenas noches, Mr. Granger.
And happy Diwali to you and your viewers.
Thank you so much, and take care, and God bless you. Yep. And to all of our listeners as well, we say thank you so much for watching. We will be back next week again, same place, same time, right here. Don't go anywhere. We have some other interesting programs later on this evening on 107.1 FM. Tata.
She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frack, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For Cockapro to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cockapro, dagaba, donkey bray, horse and they even duck a quack. Cockapro, dagaba, donkey bray, horse and they even duck a quack. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a pack down, me now a come home. Inaga, jackass yard to fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down, but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring from a